I know. I feel like they're going to come on. I'm going to be over here rocking out.
Music rocks.
All right. Hey, welcome back. Episode number 132. Speaking of music, the band is all here today. Tom, Brandon, and Carson, and Tim with us today. Tim Wackel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
So, hey, before we get into, we're going to talk a bit about, I think, some pretty interesting strategies, predominantly around B2B, larger, more, I won't just say sophisticated, but considered sales, right? Things that are not, people aren't just making a decision on immediately or doing order taking. And Tim, I know that's your background. We'll have you talk a little bit about that in a minute. Brandon, I know you have a pretty big webinar though coming up with Fist Bump here. Was it next week?
It's Friday, actually. Mark Hunter is asked me to come join him on a webinar, so I get to join him. And we're going to talk about leader-led content and how, adding that humanity touch into your content grows reputation and creates opportunities. We've got a playbook that we're going to go through.
And that's
this Friday, 11 a.m. And maybe we can get the link added in the comments somewhere. I don't have it handy, but I can go grab it. But yeah, we'll get that added.
I'm sure.
Okay. Thanks for that. I actually forgot to be ready for it. Oh man.
That's why I'm here, Brandon.
A little bit.
Anything else you'd like me to ask or coordinate for you?
Yeah, it's got it all set.
All right. Okay. All right. If you're online, check in with us. Let us know you're here. Thank you for listening. And yes, again, thank you for Fist Bump for all the work to make all this come together. So, hey, Tim, welcome again. Hey, tell us a little bit about you, your background, and then we'll kind of jump in.
So I got into this crazy thing called selling over 4 decades ago. Somebody reminded me the other day that when I learned how to sell, I didn't have a cell phone, I didn't have email, and we didn't have the internet. It's like, how in the world did you sell anything? It's like, well, it was actually a skill that you learned and you had conversations with people. That's right. You knocked on the door. But when I got out of college, Tom, you and I were talking earlier, electrical engineer, went to work for Hewlett Packard, and somebody inside the organization was like, hey, you know what? You're pretty good with a soldering iron, but we think you'd be better carrying a bag and actually calling on customers. And so very reluctantly, I got into this crazy thing called selling, and the rest is history.
So tell us how you got to where you are right now.
So that's a really good question, Tom. So I spent a lot of my career at HP, back in the 80s and 90s, which was a great place to learn how to sell. Yeah. Their training, their onboarding, their coaching, all of it was just over the top. HP did a little bit of a spinoff called Agilent Technologies. I kind of helped build part of the new business team there. Left Agilent, went and worked for an e-learning startup back when startups was kind of a fun, sexy thing to do. And then when I walked away from that opportunity, because it just tapped me out, I'd always had an interest in the sales trainers that I would hire, because I looked at the job they would do and they'd come in and work with my teams. And I thought, how much fun would this be to be able to encourage and train and motivate reps to be the best they could possibly be? So this is back in 2000. I ended up renting some office space close to the house, hung out a shingle. I put together a spreadsheet with 100 contacts. And I told my wife, I said, hey, listen, if I get to 100 no's, if I get through this, I get to 100 no's and we're not cash flow positive, I will tuck my tail and go back and work in corporate America. And I think we got to like number 71 or 72 and we were cash flow positive. And, 1 led to 2, 2 led to 5, 5 led to 11. And here we are today.
A great story.
And now
I'm concerned. So startups aren't sexy and fun anymore?
Well, 1 year in a startup is like 25 years any place else.
Oh gosh, I think I must be over 200 by now then.
Oh, it would wear me out. I'd fly out to San Jose, tuck everybody into bed, say goodnight, get back on the plane, fly back to Dallas. And by the time I got to Dallas, my phone was blowing up. I had to get back on the plane and go back out to San Jose. So I could only do that for so long.
Brandon, I think startup life agrees with you though, buddy. You're de-aging. You're looking good, man.
I every personality profile, behavioral DNA, and all that stuff. It always tells me I'm visionary and entrepreneurial, and I hate it sometimes. I'd rather just be in a corporate environment.
It's a hard knocks
Oof.
life.
Yeah.
Hey, I
Be
had a
careful.
full set of hair before my first startup. So anyway, Tim, and just so people know, you also handicap horses, right? As you see behind your head there.
No,
So,
that is not what the chart behind me is.
okay.
It's actually an old school calendar to remind everybody of where we've been and where we're trying to get to and how many dates we've got booked and the kinds of engagements we're doing. So I'm an old fashioned visual guy and I love having all that stuff on the board.
Hey, the fundamentals never go out of style.
Isn't it amazing, Carson, how the fundamentals work, but you got to work the fundamentals, you know? What a thought.
I think that visual too. I mean, I know we're going to talk about other things, but I think that visual, you know, we're going to talk about high impact habits. I think the visuals are a habit that's gone by the wayside. And I think it's so important. You see it, you know, 20 times a day and you know, the reminder you're thinking about it keeps you on focus.
You know, absolutely, Brandon. You know, I do a lot of work teaching sales teams how to do a better job of prospecting. And step one of being good at prospecting is you've got to have that defined list in front of you, right? And people are like, oh, well, we got a CRM. And it's like, dude, most of the data in that CRM is never going to see the light of day. I want to see a spreadsheet taped to your monitor with the 20 contacts you're trying to reach out to this week, the 50 contacts. I don't know what the number is, but you should. But yeah, I'm real big that if it's out of sight, it's probably out of mind. So let's plaster it someplace and have it in front of us so we know what we're doing.
I like that. I mean, I think some people could call it an old school habit because of CRMs and dashboards and everything. But I think there's something that's you can't replace the tangible of ink on paper or having a big board. I've got a big board on my wall over here too because I like to see everything and remember.
Yeah.
I want to give my main man Hugo a shout out here. Tim, what would you say? I mean, look, I love the fact that you got a real sales training, you know, back when you started. And I think, you know, we've all seen probably varying degrees of quality of sales training over the years. I think some folks nowadays just get thrown into the deep end of the pool and, you know, they're being asked, you know, where's your deal? Without getting any real training. But I've also seen like months upon months of real investment into sellers. What do you think are some of the things that today's seller is maybe lacking or not getting enough of that back in the day we got and that we probably helped us have an edge?
You know, that's a really good question, Carson. And I'm not necessarily an expert, but I can tell you what my experience is. I think a lot of salespeople today, to your point, just get thrown in the deep end, right? It's the 3-part training process. Here's our catalog. Here's your clients. Good luck, you know, and they stumble. I was having a conversation with a prospect yesterday, and he was sharing with me that, you know, they try to hire really, really good people, but none of them have sales experience. And it's like, okay, they're good people, but they have no sales experience. How are they going to be successful? And obviously that's why I'm having the conversation with him is like, I love good people, but good people have to know how to sell, right? If I run into a good person and take them to the golf course, they're not going to break 70 because they have to learn how to play golf. So it's the same gig.
I can break 70. I mean, just depends on how many holes, right? I got a follow-up question to that too, Tim. What are the fundamentals that just don't die? You know, we're going to talk today about some of the basics and the habits and the, you know, the fundamentals of selling. And I think there's been a lot of, you know, the advent and rise of technology and AI and automation in the sales process. Yes, it can help us be more efficient, but it can also make us less human. The thing that made us successful back in the, 30, 40 years ago was because we were persistent and we were playing the numbers game and we were pounding the phones, but we were developing that rapport and confidence and all of those things. What are the fundamentals that have always been paramount for us to abide by?
Again, my opinion, gentlemen,
Yeah,
but I think number one, you got to have this defined list of who you're trying to have conversations with. Whose business are you committed to pursuing? That needs to be in front of you at all times, because nobody at 4:15 on Friday afternoon defaults to prospecting mode. So what are you trying to accomplish this week? And I'm all about, and I love account maintenance. We all love account maintenance because they're calling you, they know you, they love you, they've done business with you. And it's so easy to get sucked into that reactive, I'm just going to love on you sales mode. And you can make a dime, but you're not going to make $1, right? You got to be able to take care of the installed base, plus go out and get new logos. So step one is having that identified list. Step two, Carson, I'd say you got to be able to tell a great sales story. And a sales story is, what exactly do you guys do and why in the world should I care? And most salespeople cannot tell a sales story to save their life. And what they do is they wait for the marketing team to put together the sales story. And God bless the marketing folks. But when they put together a sales story, they're trying to be all things to all people, which means they end up being nothing to everyone. So as a sales professional, you got to look and say, okay, today I'm calling on, a director of sales enablement for this type of company in this geography, in this type of industry. So I need to mold my sales story to resonate with them. So step one, having that targeted list. Step two, knowing what are the elements to putting together a great sales story. I would say step three is most salespeople today do not understand the art and science behind proper follow-up. It drives me batty. They either give up way too soon or they continue to beat it to death, and they're beating it to death with, hey, Carson, I'm just calling to check in, or hey, Carson, I wanted to call and touch base. It's like, dude, I don't even know you. Therefore, I don't want you touching my base. So stop calling, telling me you want to touch my base, right? This is highly inappropriate. In Texas, we have restraining orders. So stop. So really understanding that, follow-up should be insightful. It should be valuable. It should be fun. Your prospect should almost be like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to hear from him next, right? Sales reps have never been taught how to do that. The next fundamental, I would say, is just being incredibly curious and knowing how to ask those questions that nobody else is asking. That really, I think you sell more through what you ask than through what you say. And being able to ask those questions, it gets the prospect, the customer to go like, oh my God, yes. As a matter of fact, when I go upstairs, I do have that pain in my knee. And it's like, oh, and does it hurt more after you have chili? Yes. How did you know that? That's incredible. And being able to have that kind of diagnostic mindset. And then last but not least, once you've done all those things, then you come back and you present your ideas in such a way that they don't sound like they're your ideas. They sound like they're their ideas because you've done such a great job at the discovery. And they're like, you know what, Tim, that's exactly what we need. And you simply go, well, yeah, that's what you told me. And if you do those things and you do them well, selling, in my opinion, is relatively easy. Doesn't mean it's simple, but it's relatively easy.
Hey, I have a question, Brandon. Do you have? I don't want to cut you off because I know you would look like you might be.
No, go ahead. I was trying to formulate how I was going to ask a question, so go right ahead.
I want to go back to sales story. What you said, having a sales story, and I agree with Bob's comment here. Right, is a lot of marketing content really doesn't have much in it when it comes to crafting a sales story. And Hugo had a question here as well about what soft skills are essential for that successful presentation, especially when I assume that all of these things kind of come back to that sales story. Could you give an example of that? Like what would be an example of a sales story, and how deep does that sales story need to go? Does it need to be able to progress over multiple conversations and iterations in the sales cycle?
Really good questions, Tom. So when I teach reps the art of creating a sales story, what I do is I go, hey, first thing we've got to do is we've got to discover the ingredients that are going to go into the sales story. And then I give them a recipe for combining those ingredients into a sales story. But it's not a be all end all. What's important is that you have the right ingredients, because most sales stories are the me monster. Let me tell you all about me. So when we create sales stories, we've got to answer a series of questions. The first question is, what is the title of the person you're targeting? So I want to be able to say, you know what? I specialize in working with VPs of sales in healthcare. The minute I say that, you're listening to me a little bit differently. So we've got to make sure we know the title of the person we're targeting. Easy lifting, right? That's called LinkedIn in 7 seconds. Number two, what are some of the specific results you help people with that title achieve? And this probably is not going to surprise you guys, but most reps don't really know what specific results their customers achieve. It's like, well, our customers are happier, or they're saving money, or they're making widgets faster. And it's like, well, how much money are they saving? How much faster are they making widgets? I'll guarantee you somebody somewhere inside that client organization is measuring those numbers. You've got to get to that person. You got to go behind the curtain and find out how much are you moving the needle. So we've got to be able to say, I specialize in working with people just like you who are looking for these kinds of results. Those are the first two questions. The third question is, why do customers like that typically engage with you? In other words, why aren't they able to get those results on their own? AKA, what challenges are they facing? So now the sales story is kind of starting to sound, hey, Tom, I work with executives just like you who are looking for these kinds of results, but you're unable to get them because you're facing these kinds of challenges. Then the next question we got to be able to answer is, well, how do executives like Tom, how do you feel about those challenges? Because I want to work with prospects who are frustrated, they're sweating it out, they're losing sleep, right? If the prospect doesn't feel like it's a big deal, it's not a big deal. So I want to be able to say, Tommy, I work with a lot of executives like yourself who are really concerned about what's going on in the stock market today, right? And you're going to resonate with that. And then the fifth and final ingredient is, how are you unique? How are you different than everybody else that's out there? And that's got to be a meaningful way to be unique. So you take those 5 ingredients. I specialize in working with people just like this who are looking for these kinds of results, but are unable to get those results because these are the challenges they're facing. And this is how they typically feel about those challenges. And at the end of the day, we think we're pretty good at it because here's how we're different than everybody else. Would it be worth 10 minutes for us to have an initial fact-finding conversation?
I'm going to add a quick layer to that, and also expound upon Hugo's question, which is great. Because I think there's some that inherently we bring to the table. And Tim, you did a really great job of touching on some of these, like, how do we play out the differentiating factor? Why me versus everybody else? I live in a world where, the solutions that my team sells, there are a lot of great competitors that do something very similar. Customers can buy from anywhere. And so I take that very seriously. What are the things that I can do as a person? What can my team do? And what can my organization do that are differentiating factors? Can we, go to market with them? Can we co-sell? Can we find unique investments and, do things together that other organizations can't? I think being very transparent and communicative, responsive, Tim, you hit on the follow-up piece. So often things slip through the cracks. I've had so many customers that have done business with me and told me point blank, Carson, you're more expensive, but you're so responsive and communicative. When I have a problem, you're on it. You respond even when you don't have the answer. You respond and you loop in the right resources, and I know where I stand with you, and you respond every time I need something. I'm going to go with you because of it. So things like that, active listening, spending time really understanding the why of your motivating factors of your customers, how you orchestrate your team, making sure that everybody's in the boat with you and that they, that their perspectives matter, their priorities matter. I think those types of things go a long way. The last thing I would add that I think is critical from that vantage point, Hugo, is the acumen, that, building that muscle of being able to not only influence executives that you're talking to, but also sometimes the most important selling we do is internal. It's being able to understand, where is this customer's vantage point? How do I sell this narrative internally so I can unlock what I want to unlock for this customer?
Yeah. Well, spot on. And the responsiveness, I mean, it personally drives me crazy because I learned as a very, very young salesperson, right? If you can't do the small things right, I sure as hell ain't going to trust you with the big things. And if you can't respond to my voicemail or respond to an email within 24 hours, pre-sale, right? If you can't love on me pre-sale, what are the odds you're going to love on me post-sale? Right? We're all a lot better at dating than we are at marriage. You know what I'm saying? And so if you're trying to win my business and this is the best you got is 3 days to wait for a response, I don't think so.
Well, we woo better. We woo better in dating than we do in marriage. I'm trying to learn to continue to woo even 10 years into marriage. But I think what you really hit on there, Tim, too, is, there's a big element of, I see so often where it's like we show up so big to try to sell and we keep reiterating the value over and over and over, but we have to help the customer understand, what is that marriage going to look like? How are we going to help them lean in with change management or with implementation? It helps de-risk those decisions to work with you.
Yeah, exactly. Simple stuff, but like I said, it's not always easy. And somebody said something earlier, there's so many, I shouldn't say so many. I see reps today, though, that don't want to do those fundamentals, and they're chasing AI, or they're chasing technology stacks. They're chasing LinkedIn, and those are all nice tools. But I mean, if you go to bed at night, every night with a bowl of ice cream, you're not going to lose weight, folks. You got to do the fundamentals, right? And so trying to cheat and cut corners doesn't work.
Brandon, do you want to get us back on script?
Well, the one on agenda that we were talking about is the high impact habits and simple selling. I think we're talking about all those, but Tim, can you kind of make that just a little bit more tangible about these high impact habits? Like with teams that you work with, what does their day look like? What's their morning look like? How do they prepare for the day? What are some of those habits that lay the foundation for success?
So, Brandon, I think really good reps, number one, will plan their week in advance. I'm a real big proponent of spending, 45 minutes, an hour on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, kind of planning my week, making sure I know what my week looks like. Because if you don't get stuff on the calendar, then we just get caught in reactive mode. So number one, I think they plan their weeks. And then number two, I think they time block their days, right? Which means, from 8 to 10, I'm going to be working on some content. From 11 to 1, I'm going to be prospecting. From 2 to 4, I'm going to be doing follow-ups, whatever the case may be. But I think they plan that entire week. And then I think they time block their day. The second thing I think they do, Brandon, is they're very proactive about trying to create new relationships, prospecting, cold calling, call it whatever you want, but they're very proactive on trying to get the brand message out and trying to get in front of new people that it can influence their success. Again, it's way too easy to get caught into reactive mode, but you got to pick up the phone. You got to push emails. You got to connect with people. You got to shake hands and kiss babies if you're going to be good at sales. And I think that's another habit they have. The third habit I'd say would be something I mentioned earlier. They're just incredibly curious. Some of the best reps I've ever worked with, sometimes I just, I wanted to elbow them. It's like, are you ever going to say anything? Because you just keep asking all these questions. But when you're really good at being genuinely curious, I think the other party sometimes just talks themselves into what they're going to do. And you're just kind of facilitating. You're not really selling. You're kind of facilitating a buying decision. Yeah. And right, nobody really likes being sold to, but people buying large like to buy. So if you're good at listening and okay, so what does that mean to you? And who else does it impact? And to Carson's point, what's the why behind the what? Everybody's good at, hey, what's your biggest concern? But very few people are like, hey, what's your biggest concern? And why is that your biggest concern? Who else is that impacting? How big of an impact has that got? And probably the fourth and final thing that comes top of mind, Brandon, is I think they're sponges. I don't know that that's a habit, but I think top performers are typically sponges. They're watching programs like this. They're watching videos on YouTube. They're listening to podcasts. They're going to workshops. They're hanging out with other top performers. I did a kickoff in January. And to make this point, there are maybe 100 reps in the room. And it's like, hey, show of hands, how many of you know who the number one rep was last year? And, most of the hands went up. And I go, okay, put your hands down. Here's my follow-up question. Show of hands. How many of you in the last 30 days have reached out to that number one rep and said, I want to buy you a beer. I want to buy you a cup of coffee. I want to trail you for a while. I want to see what you're doing, man, because you are on fire and I want to learn from you. You know how many hands went up?
Zero.
Right. Because everybody's on this island. It's like, look, if somebody's rocking it, right? If Tom is just crushing it, go spend some time with Tom, buy him lunch and pick his brain, see what's going on. And I think reps that are really good are willing to put their pride aside and just say, hey, I need some help leveling up my game, and I don't know what you're doing, but I'd love to find out. Would you be willing to share with me?
You answer Hugo's question about where the key soft skills you believe are essential. And he said for pre-sales, but I think it's through the entire sales process. And two things that I heard you say in there very clearly, I think, are listening skills and curiosity skills. And I don't think those are taught anymore in sales. But what I heard you say is those are probably the two most important skills that they need to learn. And if they do that well, the conversation will kind of flow in the direction they need it to go. But we don't focus on those, training those skills.
No, I think what happens, and I've been there and done that, and I still do it today, right? It's not like I'm having this conversation from my boat, right? So I still struggle doing these things. We hear a customer and they give us that warm fuzzy that they're interested. And then what do we want to do? We want to default to pitch mode, right? We hear that they're interested and we just immediately goes to solution. And yeah, you got to really tap the brakes, Brandon. And so why do you think you're interested? Who else have you talked to? Why is this important? Who else does it impact? What do you think should happen next? I mean, you just got to really dig down. And part, for those of you tuning in, part of that is, well, for me personally, I just can't wing those. I'm a real big believer in planning and preparing my questions in advance. Because when I show up and they see me open my portfolio and they see I've got pages and pages of questions, they know I'm a professional. They know I prepared for this call and they know I'm going to respect their time versus showing up and saying, hey, so what exactly keeps you guys up at night? It's like, really? Mexican food. What's your next question, Sparky? Come on, let's go.
Yeah, and to Dominique's comment on here about it's a buyer's market, no longer a seller's market. And if we show up in sales mode, I think Anthony Iannarino, not the last time he was here, the time before, he talked about the salespeople that go and do two presentations with the company he was working with, two different presentations. The next day he said, what do you remember? And they were like, the one guy wore a white shirt and the other guy wore a red shirt because they sounded exactly alike.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that goes back to being different. I mean, focus on those fundamentals and be extraordinary at the fundamentals and watch what happens.
Yeah. Good answers. Thank you for that.
Oh,
so let's take a step back for a minute, because in Brandon and Carson, maybe, I don't know who was on, we were chatting a little bit before. Tim tends to focus on working with more enterprise sales, longer sales cycle, considered purchases, right? So it's not one and done, right? They're not picking up the phone and placing an order. You brought up, managing your week, planning out your week in advance. And, you've talked a little bit about how to, get in the door, so to speak, from prospecting. But when you're building out your weekly plan or your strategy, how do you balance I guess there's probably three buckets, right? There's reaching out to new logos. There's follow up with people where you may not already have something previously scheduled. And then you have your previously scheduled follow up and other actions that you do. And what I notice a lot, I notice this in our own business, when we get busy with a lot of pre-scheduled follow up, the other stuff just kind of goes away. Yeah. And we're not doing proactive follow up and we're not doing proactive outreach. How do you think that should ideally be balanced because it's very easy, right? If you have 3 or 4 weeks of planned follow-up, then all of a sudden you get those deals closed and your pipeline's kind of deteriorated into nothing.
Yeah. It's a simple answer, Tom, but it's really discipline. Because I've been through those cycles before where, I got caught up in what's going on and I wasn't paying attention to the pipeline, and then the pipeline dries up, and then you got 3 or 4 months of your kids getting skinny and you're like, how did that happen? Well, it's because I took my eye off the ball. So that's why, like, on a daily basis, I love to see reps do some time blocking. Personally, I try to do 3 2-hour blocks each day, because I've discovered after about 2 hours of doing any set activity, I get a little burned out, a little bored with it. So 3 2-hour blocks is a 6-hour day. That gives me another at least 2 hours to tend to any emergencies, anything that just kind of shows up on the calendar. Maybe I want to take a long lunch, whatever the case may be. But if I can get a real focused 6 hours every day, I usually can get a lot done. But it's discipline, because in the heat of the moment, it's always easier to choose the easier path. You know what I'm saying? I'd really rather work on my LinkedIn profile than to put together a new sales story. But it's like, look, I got to get a new sales story because that's what's going to pay the rent.
Tim, what tools do you use to prospect, and how has your process changed over time?
So that's an interesting question, Carson. I am embarrassingly old school. I mean, I am using LinkedIn, right? I know what my ideal client profile looks like. I know the people that have had success with me. So why not go try to find the same kind of people? I'm going to hit them up with my sales story, but I know that, what's the figure? Like 80% of new business opportunities today are going to require at least 5 failed attempts. So I don't get discouraged. I don't get disgusted. So when I'm reaching out, I'm typically like reaching out in an email, and then I'm going to drop like a little sales tip booklet in the mail, kind of, something of value saying, hey, I sent you an email a couple days ago. You might not have seen it, but I'm thinking the folks on your team might find some value in these ideas. I'll reach out next Tuesday at 3 to see if we can't connect live. Tuesday at 3, I call knowing we're not going to connect live, but showing I'm a man of my word, saying, hey, I told you I'd call Tuesday at 3. I didn't know if I'd catch you or not. But here's the reason I'm trying to connect. And then I give them a different version of my sales story. I'll mail out tchotchkes. I'll mail out lottery ticket, the old get a bunch of dollar scratch off lottery tickets, put a rubber band around them, send them to you, Carson, with a note. You're going to open up that envelope because you feel those lottery tickets rattling around in there. You see those scratch off tickets, you scratch them off. Then you look at the note. My note says, hey, Carson, if you scratch off those lottery tickets, if you're willing to take a chance on them, why won't you take a chance on me? All I want is an initial 10-minute fact-finding conversation. And that's always what I'm looking for, is just a 10-minute fact-finding conversation. Because I've discovered that if you're really good in 10 minutes, those 10 minutes grow to 20, 30, and 40, because I don't show up and throw up. I show up and say, hey, listen, man, I'm just genuinely curious. What are you guys hitting your head on right now? And is there a way for me to help?
I love it. I like that you said, old school and threw LinkedIn into the mix, but at the same token, like, again, it's a very straightforward process. It reminds me, I'm a huge James Bond fan. I don't hide that. One of my favorite films is Skyfall, and it's Daniel Craig, but it does a lot of nostalgic throwbacks. And there's a line in there where, he's using an old style razor, and his line is, sometimes the old ways are the best. And obviously the old Bond movies are the best, but my point in saying that is, now is more than ever a time where things like LinkedIn, but even picking up the phone and dialing people can have a dramatic success rate, because not everybody's doing it right now. A lot of people are leaning into the AI written emails. And so people are being flooded with that. So your email success rate is going way, way down. But things like picking up the phone, leveraging LinkedIn, I'm still having massive amounts of success leveraging LinkedIn to connect with pretty much anybody I want, because everybody else is running toward AI written emails. So everyone, please keep doing that, because it's upping my success rate.
Yeah, and I've played around with those technologies, and I think AI is great. It just wasn't my cup of tea. It again, for my practice and the people I sell to, they're buying me, and I get AI involved, and it's not me. It's close, but it ain't me.
Yeah,
and I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but that's okay too, because the sooner you decide you don't like me, that's a good decision. Let's move on.
I was gonna say, like, a yes or no is better than a maybe so. I remember years ago when I ran a call center, and people would walk up to me and be like, oh my gosh, Carson, I just got asked to send this proposal out for, a massive nationwide program. I'm like, great. When are you talking to the customer again? Oh, I don't know. I'm just supposed to send this proposal. And I'm like, you'll never hear from them again. You might as well put them on a milk carton. Like, the point in saying that is, it's critical to do, Tim, exactly what you just described. We've got to really understand the why behind. And I'd much rather get to, yes, there's a path we can go down together, or no, there isn't. But I'm available if you ever need me, type of thing, because that frees me up to spend my time and resources going out and finding other people where magic can happen. I mean, I'm not offended if magic doesn't happen. I've become very calloused over the time with a lot of the rejections and the no's, they don't hurt me. I don't take them personally. That's why it's so critical that we're going out, we're making the calls, we're sending the emails, and we're leveraging LinkedIn. I love it.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out that Bob is also old school. He uses a rotary phone and a Rolodex. I'm wondering if it's one of those rotary phones that are on the wall. You know, those old ones used to be on the wall.
So I have an old souvenir. This was actually, I keep this because it was my grandma's.
That a baby.
That's how I get my prospects.
Oh
yeah.
Is that a pink phone, or was that?
It is. Yeah, it's my
awesome.
grandma's. Yeah, my kids like to play with it now. So
you can tell you had a good day prospecting when you go home with a blister around your index finger, right? That's a good day.
that's very true.
So Tim, you were talking about, and this happens a lot, right? Especially in longer sales cycles. Maybe you have a couple of phone calls, things seem to be going very well, progressing, and then all of a sudden the person ghosts you and disappears for a while. Do you have any strategies about how to kind of resurrect some of those situations? Because in a lot of times I've found it isn't that they don't want to buy from you, but something else has come in, or short term, there's another priority change. And you're thinking, oh, well, this is a lost deal. And they've just added, it's not a lost deal. It's just been extended out, but you don't know that. So there's no communication. Any thoughts on kind of resurrecting those, or at least getting some answers and getting the maybe out of the equation?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tom, because we all battle that. So I'm just going to riff. Tip number one, and it goes back to what Carson was just talking about. You got to be a great closer. And when I mean you got to be a great closer, it's not closing for business. You always need to close for exactly what the next step looks like, when the next engagement's going to be, whether it's a conversation, a Zoom, face-to-face. But there's none of this, send me a proposal, let's talk next week. That ain't happening. This is quid pro quo. I'll send you a proposal. What time and date are we going to get together to discuss it? So you got to be proactive on the front end. But no matter how, okay, number one. Number two, I think, Tom, you've got to make it easy for your customer to say no. Because oftentimes we as sales reps get the happy ears, I call it hope-ium, and we make it really hard for we make it really hard for the customer to tell us no. And we think there's an interest where there's really not an interest. Let me give you an example, real simple hope-ium example. Asking a customer, gee, would you like me to go ahead and put together a proposal, is one of the dumbest questions you can ask. Because, Tom, let's assume you're a rock star sales rep. You're calling on me. You're prepared. You've worked in my industry. You're asking me great questions. I love your solution. At the end of the sales call, Tom, you say, hey, Tim, would you like me to put together a proposal? I'm going to say, yeah. And then let's say Carson calls on me tomorrow, and Carson is a hot, sweaty mess. He doesn't understand my industry. He's just talking, not asking any questions. I'm looking for an excuse to get out of the sales call. And Carson goes, hey, you want me to go ahead and put together a proposal? I, like most of you, are going to say yes, because as a species, we're non-confrontational. So part of the reason they're ghosting you is because you didn't really fish correctly. So for all the people tuning in, here's the twist on it. Don't ever ask, hey, you want me to put together a proposal? You say, hey, Brandon, I'd love to work with you guys. And I sense there might be an opportunity here, but I get this feeling that maybe it's a little bit premature to put together a proposal. What are your thoughts? And now Brandon is either going to fight me and say, oh, no, Tim, it is not premature. I really want that proposal. So that's a good indication. Or Brandon is going to say, you're right, Tim. It's a little premature, because Brandon doesn't want to call me an idiot. If I'm the bumbling idiot, no customer wants to say, I don't want your proposal because you're an idiot. So make it easy for the customer to say no. Then on the flip side, Tom, if they do go dark, I think your follow-up, your reach out has got to be fantastic. One of the best subject lines I use is I'll send an email, and the subject line is, have I done something wrong? And then it'll be like, hey, Carson, we've had multiple great conversations. We put this proposal together, but I haven't heard from you now in 3 weeks, and I've attempted 7 different times. I've got nothing left to assume but that I've done something wrong, and I'd love to be able to own that and apologize to whoever I've offended. And you'd be amazed how many times people come screaming back, and it's like, no. Sally's out on maternity leave. Bob took another job. The plan expansion is going longer. I mean, then you get the real why they're not there, because they got other things they're worried about, right? We as sellers wake up thinking about them. They don't wake up thinking about us. So, you got to go to sometimes more dramatic measures. And the other thing I'll do too is I'll put together like a multiple choice email, because nobody loves essay tests. Everybody likes multiple choices. And it's like, hey, tell me where we're at. A, call me right away. Let's move forward. B, go away forever. Or C, hey, Tim, something's come up. Check back in 6 weeks, and kind of let the customer just check a box and get back to me. But the bottom line is, Tom, just make it really easy for them and make sure you're driving that value, and you've always got that next step defined.
Yeah, I've used a similar thing where I haven't used the one where I've done something wrong, but I've definitely used the one that, hey, I just can only assume that you're no longer interested in this. No problem. I'm going to go ahead and, and then, oh, wait, whoa. Right. So any sort of withdrawal situation can sometimes create that situation there.
And I love that. When I teach prospecting, I talk about firing a prospect, right? That if you've gone through all these different outreaches and you're getting nothing back, don't just tuck your tail and fade to black. You reach out to the prospect one last time. You go, hey, Carson, this is Tim, and I'm leaving this voicemail for two reasons only. Number one, I want to apologize for having wasted your time, because I did my homework, I did my research, and I thought it made a ton of sense for us to have an initial 10-minute fact-finding conversation. But given your non-responsiveness over the last 5 weeks, obviously I was wrong. Second reason I'm calling is I want to let you know you're never going to hear from me or anybody else on my team ever again, and we wish you nothing but the best. And the same thing, Tom, every once in a while, you leave that message, and they call you right back. They're like, whoa, slow down. It's like, dude, what are you doing to me here? Come on.
I've a piece of advice I got early, which aligns what you were just talking about, is, your prospecting customer has a very big part in your movie, but you have a very small part in their movie. And I think if you remember that, it helps oh my God, I'm being ghosted. They don't care about me. It's not important. And at least try and work to get to that. Because in some cases it is, right. It's not a fit or it's not relevant. But in a lot of cases, it's just other things in their movie have usurped your part in that movie of what's going on. So, Brandon, do you want to touch on some LinkedIn stuff, or what would be some?
Yeah, so there was a question in there. I think it was under, I think it was just LinkedIn user. Now I can't find it.
Oh, I got it here. It says, can you touch on some LinkedIn strategies, techniques? Not sure if I missed them earlier in the call.
Yeah. I think, what I was hearing, Tim, you were talking like when you were saying too about sales reps, time blocking, you said about creating content and then getting to their calls. And I believe there's a good kind of 1-2 punch with content and calls, and even using content inside of emails or referencing in an email post or shows. We do that a lot. We reference different shows and topics, say, hey, I think this topic could be something valuable for you, and do a little summary of the episode or give them timestamps. So, hey, we talked about this at, 42:10 type of stuff. But what's your technique? What are your strategies?
When it comes to using LinkedIn?
Yeah. The question is, can y'all touch on some LinkedIn strategies and techniques that you use? I know you talked about content. You talked about using LinkedIn in combination with your other outreach.
Yeah. So, with LinkedIn, probably not super sophisticated, but again, I look at the types of clients I've been able to help the most. And that's the DNA I'm looking for. So, what industry, what part of the country, what demographic, there's a lot of different, well, there's not a lot, there's maybe a dozen different variables. And then I start searching through LinkedIn, and it's like, you know what? These people, I've done work in a one-off. This would be a good customer for me to go after. And then again, I'm going to do, I'd love to, as an initial thing, send some content, something, Brandon, and not like a brochure that says hire Tim Wackel sales training, but like, like an article that I've written on, hey, here's the four things that are critical to being successful at prospecting. Or here's the 10 things you got to worry about before your next presentation. In other words, I'm trying to send something of value to warm that person up into having that initial conversation with me. And I think way too many reps lead with, hey, here's our catalog. Here's a line card. Why don't you go out to our website and look around, see if there's something there you might like? It's like, are you kidding me? Demonstrate that you're an expert in the space and that you bring value and that you offer solutions. And then I think you got a better chance of having a conversation.
Yeah.
I think it touches too on Bob's comment, which I thought there was a ton of value in. You're really seeking a micro commitment at every step of the sales process, and LinkedIn is no different, in my opinion. I have a ton of success with LinkedIn. I've shared that a lot on this show. But to really simplify it, I find the most success by doing what Tim just described. Going out and kind of finding what is your target audience, cast a wide net. Get really crisp on what is your messaging. My best success on LinkedIn is actually earning a first degree connection with someone, and describing briefly why I'm seeking that connection. Now, in my case, for a lot of customers, my company's logo is a known entity for some great reasons and some not as great with particular customers. So, but the nice thing is that there's usually some type of awareness, or there's some type of value that I can bring in demystifying all of the things that my organization can do for them. So that's kind of usually in my intro, and that gives me the highest probability of success. You can send 100 connection requests a week. I do every week. I usually get 40 to 50 that accept, and I usually get about 10 meetings per week booked out of those. And I know what I can do with those meetings. And see, that's why the fundamentals are so important. We're looking to get that micro commitment to a meeting. I don't bring up a product or a solution or a service at any time in the early going. I need to earn the right to have that meeting. I need to get to know that customer. I ask them questions like, what brought you into this organization? What do you want your legacy to be? What are your challenges that you're having right now? Tell me about your existing solutions. And, lo and behold, we're not always going to unseat the competitors. I think a lot of times sellers try to go toe to toe with the greatest strength of their competition. You're going to lose every time. But if you can understand, like, where can I bring value? Can I bring value for this person? And you do it enough, you get yourself enough at bats, and you earn a micro commitment to that next step and the next step and so on and so forth. That's what will help you be successful. That's the greatest success I have on LinkedIn, is using it to get meetings. And while, yes, I do post, and yes, I do comment, there's no silver bullet. I've gotten meetings from commenting on people's threads. I've gotten meetings from asking people to be on other podcasts that I'm on. All of these things, LinkedIn can help you meet people. And that's the key. Get the meeting.
You know what I heard?
And then I would say, Carson.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brandon. And I would say, Carson, that when you conduct yourself that way and you make that kind of positive impression, and they decide not to go with you, when you circle back in 6 months, 9 months, or a year later, they're going to recognize that name, and they're probably going to respond because of the way you conducted yourself. So you may not get an at bat in the first inning, but you might get an at bat in the fifth inning. And I think a lot of salespeople, get told no, and then they move on to the next shiny object. It's like, no. Nurture back on that, because things change, right? And solutions sometimes don't always work out the way we thought they were. And the rep that follows back up and says, "Hey, I'm just curious, how did that go? Well, how's that implementation moving for you?" And they love it. They're like, "Hey, be honest with you, we're having a little bit of trouble. Can we talk some more?" It's like, love to.
I had one that took 3 years, is inviting them to things, sending them my newsletter, finally formed a relationship, deal got done. So you're spot on.
What I wanted to point out for everybody, Carson, what I heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. We've been on the show for 130 some episodes together. But, you use LinkedIn, you comment, you post, you send messages, you offer your value, you offer a story to create a call. And what I heard you say in that call, you listen well and you're curious. You're not selling. That's the key thing. It always comes back to that. There's a, and Tim, you mentioned earlier, like taking raffle tickets and mailing it to them. There's 1,000 different ways we could create that initial call, but it's once you get on that call that I think where most salespeople fall down nowadays, because they go right into sales mode. But what Carson was saying, for people that are asking these questions, he got on that first call and he listened well, and he's genuinely curious, and that gets the micro win that keeps the conversation flowing. And it creates like a culture in that dyadic relationship, that they're seeing Carson as a trusted advisor. They're seeing Carson as somebody they want to speak to. They're seeing him as a resource that's going to help them, not somebody that's trying to shove a product or service down their throat.
Yeah. And often the biggest value that I can bring these folks is, getting them to put me to work for them, like going back internally and selling my organization on unlocking investments and people and resources to go to work with them and for them, and demystifying some of the things that my organization can do that maybe they don't know about. Those are the unique differentiating factors. I don't have to lead with products, solutions. There's a lot of products and solutions out there. The biggest value I can bring them is the tribal knowledge that my team and I have.
That's good.
So
That's great.
as we kind of get to the end here, there was one
Oh my
question I
gosh,
wanted.
we're at 50 minutes.
Yeah.
That was fast.
That, Zoom
That was
by.
a really fast one.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about one of the points that we had that we were going to discuss is avoiding time wasters and dead ends. I know we've kind of hit on that, but specifically, right, to your point, Tim, right, as even organizing your day and planning out your week, what are some time wasters that we should really consciously be on the alert for, and the dead ends that we should be on the alert for?
For me, Tom, the time wasters are falling in love with opportunities that aren't real. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier. I'm suffering from hope-ium. I took a hit off the hope-ium pipe. I called this customer. They expressed a little bit of interest, and I get all lathered up, and we're pulling out all the stops, and we're putting together slide decks and proposals, and we're introducing them to other customers, and they were just casually interested. And that's my biggest time waster is I just want to think everybody wants to do business with me. And guess what? That's not true. So you got to be honest with yourself and say, hey, we're not the right fit for everybody. And I got to find the people we are the right fit for. And those are the people I want to do business with.
So that,
and then to tag on to that, Tom. So if you don't have a robust pipeline, that's when you get into hope-ium, is because you've only got 3 or 4 deals in there and you want to hang on to them forever. Yeah. And it's like, you gotta let that one go. You gotta shut off the machine and go find somebody else, because that patient is do not resuscitate, right? Got a DNR tag on their toe, move on.
So avoid the dead ends are the time wasters, basically, is what I'm hearing you say.
For me, it is. And then the other thing too, with all the technology we have around us, it's easy sometimes. It's like, what? I wonder, we talked about AI earlier. I'll be like, hey, I wonder if AI can help me do this. And 75 minutes later, I'm still trying to find the end of the internet. So that's why I like the time blocking, is it really, it protects me from going down rabbit holes. And it's like, when I woke up that morning, I said I wanted to do 2 hours of this. I got to make sure I stay committed to that.
Great advice. Carson, Brandon, any final questions you'd like to, there's been some, I think, really good practical discussion today.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it, is we were talking a little before we started. I mean, I think, and you can tell in the comments, that was very practical, Tim. You're giving very tactical advice. I think that's what people are looking for right now, because they are so challenged with just getting the calls, but then converting that call to something meaningful. And I think I'm going to borrow I took a hit from the hope-ium pipe. I like that.
Yeah, I'd heard happy years before, for sure, but I'd never heard hope-ium.
Hope-ium, that's good.
I'm probably going to get arrested for this eventually. But
I was just going to say, I'm sure I'm going to offend somebody with that, but other people will chuckle.
There's 8 billion people on the planet. I'll find someone else.
There's always somebody too upset. Tim, I'm curious. First off, anything else that you were hoping to hit on while we were together today? But I'm also, again, I'm conscious that some of the things that we've outlined today, they're easier said than done. People are under different types of pressures. Sometimes they don't, enter a true sales culture, or maybe they have a sales leader that's never gotten the necessary training and they don't understand the value of all these types of things. So, for our listeners that are out there that are maybe struggling with they're freaking out because of things that are going on in the world, or they're looking at their social media feed and they're getting caught up in all the things. Like, how do people stay focused on what they should do and maybe take the emotion and kind of out of it? Because I found a lot of success by approaching this relatively dispassionately. You can't take the no's seriously. You've got to, really become obsessed with process and people, of course. But by doing that, that is what's helped me be successful over time, is consistency and discipline, like you said. If there's somebody out there struggling with that today, what's your advice to those folks?
I think you hit on it, Carson. You just got to stay consistent. Way too often we're trying to, to go back to the sports metaphor, we step up to the plate and we're trying to hit the grand slam home run. And I'm like, look, just get wood on the ball, right? The old metaphor is, can you get just 1% better today? And most people are like, oh yeah, I can get 1% better. Well, get 1% better today, do it again tomorrow, do it again the next day. And guess what? In 72 days, you're twice as good as you are right now. That's the way the math plays out. So way too often, I think we just, to your point, we just get overwhelmed, we get depressed, we get anxious, and we're like, F it, I'm just going to go to Instagram. Well, don't F it. Don't go to Instagram. Work the process, be true to yourself, and be disciplined. I mean, you gotta think about what your future self really wants and work towards that goal. And that doesn't mean it's always easy. Again, I'm not doing this for my Learjet, folks. I struggle with all the stuff I preach about, but I got the best job in the world, because after I preach about it, then I feel convicted. And the minute we get off here, I'm getting back on it, because it's like, if you're going to talk about it, Tim, you need to be able to do it as well. You need to be a practitioner.
Yeah. I mean, look, in the last, year, I've probably gotten more rejections than any salesperson on the planet, but I've also opened up 100 net new relationships that nobody's ever gotten or said were impossible. So, I think that's the key element, is stay focused, eyes on the prize. Devote yourself to the process, be consistent, show up, and do what you got to do.
And stay away from the hope-ium hookah. That's
the hope-ium hookah.
Good advice.
That's
good
right.
advice.
That's good.
All right.
Just say no, kids.
Just say no.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim.
That was excellent today.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys. I've got Carson and I have been talking about doing this for a while, so I'm finally glad the stars aligned and we got it on the calendar.
Amen.
And time did fly. All right. Well, thanks again, Brandon, Carson. Great to have you back. We need to do this more often. Although, Brandon, we had a really good interview last week with Carson on his book. So if you haven't listened to that, it's worth checking out.
I saw some of it. I started to play it in my car the other day, and then my phone rang, and I never got back to it. So I will listen.
Thank you. It's fun.
All right, Carson, wrap us up.
1 second. We got a message that came in. Curious how to you as a sales rep sell your manager that doesn't get the prospecting process, especially in the large national prospects. That's a great question, and I'm going to hit that one very quickly. How do you sell your manager on the process? Sometimes you can't. I was in a situation once upon a time where I knew that what the right process was, and I was executing that process, but my manager didn't get it. Nothing good or bad lasts in sales. And so the best calling card in sales is results. And when you don't have it, you really just have to be able to know that process is going to work, and you've got to commit yourself to that process. I was committed to a process, and I was able to start showcasing to my manager, hey, these are meetings that I'm getting left and right as a result of this process. They didn't care because it wasn't results. It wasn't revenue. Over time, the revenue did come. Now, fortunately, there are some managers out there who do care about the hustle stats. They care about the tangible day-to-day, get the meeting, get the net new contact. Hopefully that is the case with some of you, with your leadership. The key element is I've had great sales managers and I've had terrible sales managers, and I've had several in between. So the key element is try to make it about your manager. Understand what they care about. If they just care about revenue and results, well, then you better try to work your butt off to get those results as quickly as possible. However, if they can also tell you, like, hey, these are big problems that we have, like getting this exact executive, like the CFO or the CEO or the CIO, I've created processes to go out and get those specific meetings and then brought my team in or passed the baton to individual sellers that sell to that line of business. So think very intentionally about what does your manager care about? What do they say the problem statements are? And then you ultimately need to sell them on your prospecting process, but make your prospecting process speak to them, make it about them, make it about what they say your problem is.
Great advice.
Good stuff. All right. And then I'm supposed to close.
That was a
So
bonus. That was a little bonus data.
This was a lively one. This was fun. So Tim, awesome to see you as always. And Brandon and Tom, it's good to be with you as it always is. And for everybody joining, thanks for being on. And until next week, happy modern selling.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.